use the space in the far back corner for private reflection during this service. People of all ages are welcome to move about the sanctuary as they need to, or to make themselves comfortable in the cozy zone up front. Today, children are invited to be with us during the entire service. We also have childcare available for children under the age of 4 in the nursery located in the parish hall. Many thanks to Kevin Murray, who is our camera point person today, and to Ruth Kahn, who is our Zoom usher. If you are new to Theodore Parker Church or visiting today, we would love to stay in touch with you. You're invited to fill out a connection card, which will give you an opportunity to sign up for our weekly updates and to help us welcome you. A link to the connection card will be in the chat, as well as in our contact information. Those joining us here in the sanctuary are encouraged to fill out the contact card that you will find in your pews within the welcome brochure. We'd like to take a moment to greet one another. For those of you on Zoom, please put your video on for the first time to help us to connect with you. Kevin, would you please put our sanctuary screen on gallery view so we can see our off-site congregation? Let us give each other a big wave. Sanctuary folks, the camera is under the clock directly at the back. As we continue to greet each other, if online, you may post a hello in the chat. If you are physically in the sanctuary, we invite you now to greet one another. As we reconvene our service today, I would invite you to be seated while Yukiko shares the prelude for this morning by Eric Satie.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Heather Concannon. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the minister of this congregation.
My name is Rose Gologly. My pronouns are also she, her, and I serve as this congregation's religious educator.
This morning, our opening words are A Catechism of Questions by Reverend Kendall Gibbons. We proclaim a saving message for the world. Can that message save ourselves?
Until we establish institutions that are places of health, why should anyone listen to our advice?
We bring our failures and our fears and the limits of our wisdom. Is it safe here to be just as we are?
The hunger and aspiration of our spirits can be overwhelming. Is the center strong enough to hold us?
The ghost of all our unfinished loves are with us in this world. What can we do to make peace, to be healed?
We challenge false comforts of superstition and conformity. When shall we learn to live in compassion without fear?
Too much is broken, disgraced, spoiled, thrown away. Who will speak the hope of redemption?
For too long, luck and privilege have prevailed without consequences. How shall we bring power into accountability?
Generations have sacrificed and struggled for our liberty. Do we carry the light of that heritage high?
A new time beckons with the promise of good yet unknown. Is that vision a fire in our hearts?
Love and wisdom seek to live in our deeds and in the places we build. If not us, who? And if not now, when? I invite us to rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1003, Where Do We Come From? And I will lead this in a moment. So our opening hymn is 1003 in the teal hymnal, Where Do We Come From? And there are 3 parts, and I will teach them part by part, and then Brian and I will lead. So the first part goes like this. I'll sing it once through, and then you can sing it through. Thank you. Sing it with me. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Try that. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? The second part goes like this. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? And the third part goes, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. So I will sing all through just in that order, but they are layering on songs. We can sing it as a round. You can pick one part and keep singing that part if you really like it. You can follow along with me. You can follow along with Brian, and we'll sing them all together. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Thank you.
please join me now in saying the words of our chalice lighting, our shared covenant words that we say each week, both in English and in Spanish. Teddy is ready to come up and light the chalice. The Spanish we say in honor of our sibling community in Plazuelas, El Salvador. The words will be up on your screen. Please say them with me. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es nuestra oración. Esta es nuestra gran promesa, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad con amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Good morning. So this morning we have a very special type of service that we are doing that is done in many Unitarian Universalist churches, but I don't know if it's been done here before, and I have actually never led one before, which is a question box service. So in today's service, you will have opportunities to ask questions, and during our sermon time, Rose and I will answer them. And asking questions is this is both a fun activity, I think, but it's also a very important theological practice. Because asking questions is a particularly important part of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Far back into our Unitarian and Universalist past, our spiritual ancestors were often called heretics. And that was often because they asked questions about what was commonly believed. Because they used their questions as a way to deepen their own faith commitments, and they expressed their doubts openly. And today, still, I think that asking questions is an important part of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It's a way into deeper meaning-making. It's a way into developing our own beliefs and theologies, both personally and as a community. And I also think that questions can sometimes be seen as very dangerous by people in power, right? Sometimes people in power try to discourage us from asking questions. They ask us because questions ask us to really examine and stand behind what we believe, and they ask us not to take the status quo for granted. And all sorts of situations, an open-hearted and curious question can be a way into deeper relationship. So this month our monthly worship theme is trust, and I think it takes a particular type of trust to ask a question. I think it's very vulnerable to ask a question and not have the answer. And I also think that a question, an open and honest question, can be like an open door, not knowing what's on the other side, but having some faith before you open that door and ask that question. And I also think that it takes some trust for Rose and I to answer questions on the spot, not having time to prepare our answers. So today, as we explore the power of questions, we'll all lean into that trust together. The trust it takes to ask open-hearted questions, and the trust it takes to speak from the heart in our responses. So as you came in this morning, many of you got a index card and a pen. If you didn't get one, we will bring some around to you. You can just raise your hand. You don't have to, that's fine. We've got some up here. And you can write a question on that piece of paper. It might be a question you've always wondered about Unitarian Universalism. It might be something that is on your mind and heart right now that you'd love to get our thoughts and reflections on. I can't promise that we have answers, but we'll have some thoughts and reflections. And I invite people of all ages to write questions down. Last week in Children's Chapel, the kids prepared a few questions for us, but if kids have questions today that they want to specifically write down, please do so. And unfortunately, we're not going to have time to answer all of them, but we will try to answer a variety and get through a number of them. So, Brian, I'm wondering if you might be able to play guitar for us on this. I forgot to ask you this ahead of time. Speaking of trust and something curious, something questioning, I could play, but people might not want that. And we'll take a few minutes to write them down. And I'm also wondering if I could get a few, maybe kid volunteers to collect questions in this box once people are ready.
Now we'll begin deepening into our time of meditation and prayer. And as we do so, I invite you to enter into this moment, here and now. Feel the earth's gentle gravity holding you. Take a few nurturing breaths. Give yourself over to this time of stillness. Today we will be sharing spoken joys and concerns following our centering hymn. So before we move into that space, I invite you to remain seated and join in singing our centering hymn, number 16 in our gray hymnal, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." The words will also be up on the screen. We come into community to share our lives and our hearts with one another. One of the ways we do this is to offer opportunities to share what brings us joy as well as what brings us sorrow. In sharing, our joys are multiplied and the burdens of our sorrows are lightened. Most weeks we have an opportunity to share joys and concerns in a written format, but about once a month, we invite folks to share their joys and sorrows out loud, which we will do today. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you would like to share, I invite you to come forward to this microphone, to light a candle, and to share with us what is on your heart. If you're joining this morning on Zoom, I invite you to type your joy or sorrow in the chat, and I will read it out loud and light a candle for you. Please come forward now if you have a joy or a sorrow to share with this community.
Hi, I'm Kathy. My pronouns are she, her, and I just have lots of joys this morning. I'll light one candle to represent all of them. My nephew, Sam Gualteri, made an animated film starring my dad, and it is going to be shown at the Florida Film Festival in a couple weeks, which is an Oscar qualifying competition. So we're really excited for him. Natalie did amazing in her poetry slam. She's going to be sharing one of her poems next week during service. There's a technicality. We're not sure if she's going to the finals, but we'll know soon. And lastly, Gregory got his driver's license. Yay!
So my joy is one about art and community. Yesterday I went to Concord to see the quilt exhibit by three quilters, quilt exhibit, 3 quilters guilds. And one quilt made me cry, another gave me shivers. There were political quilts, there were artistic quilts, and there were old quilts. So if anybody feels like seeing a beautiful, beautiful thing, go. It's, Concord Academy, today until 4 o'clock, I think, maybe till 5. 132 Main Street, maybe, Concord? Yes.
My name's Steve Green. Some of you may remember me from when I was here a few years ago. And now I'm back in town visiting, and that is a joy to come here again. But an even bigger joy is that last fall, I became a grandfather, twice over.
Hi. Like Steve, I'm often not here, so I'm very happy to be here. My name is Andrea DeRemus, and I live over in the Grove. And my joy is that when I am here, I'm a retired U.S. history teacher from Boston Post Schools, but when I come here, I substitute. And, you know, the world is so, it's just, you know, we all are having this heavy heart, at least I have a lot, because of all the crazy things in the world. And on Thursday and Friday, I got to work at the Curly, which I've had some not great experiences there, but I was with the little kids, and I was sitting there, and I was seeing the teacher and the little kids, and everything was just so loving and beautiful and wonderful. The teacher was so caring, and they were, you know, K1, so they were just, and I was like, oh, here we are in this crazy world, and yet there's all this beauty. I just was so, and I thought, well, how can I share that? And I'm like, oh, here, I have an opportunity. So, I mean, you know, it was just amazing. So thank you.
Yes, please do. Please do light for the sorrow. I'll read a few as you're lighting. I'll read a few from those joining us on Zoom. From Lisa Handelman, my cousin gave birth to a healthy baby girl this week. And my cousin Debbie's cancer did not spread to the lymph nodes. Doctors think it is stage 2. She is resting comfortably and will be removed from intensive care. Candle for a new baby and for a good prognosis.
Mostly right now, I'm Jessica Mink. Mostly right now, I have lots of concerns because I'm a scientist, and a lot of my friends work for the government, including me, and I think we're all most of us haven't been laid off or fired or anything yet, but people are starting to get that way, and everybody's lost a few people. My daughter lost her job really early because she worked on a grant from USAID in the U.S. Institute for Peace. So she double. And, but I have a great joy, because every decade or so I buy a new commuting bike. And I just got one yesterday, and I rode to church. So it was my first long uphill ride on it. It's really wonderful to ride. So that sort of, I don't know, it blocks out a little of the concern for a few minutes when I'm on the bike. Thank you.
A few more from Zoom. I think Ruth is sharing a prayer of healing for cousin Frank, who had a heart implant. Also a prayer for my friend Jan Stankus, who undergoes hip replacement surgery this week. And a prayer for Yana, who also gets a heart implant this week. From Lee Hewitt, a joy and a concern. Concern is because my brother Bill is recovering from surgery, and joy because my brother Rob and his wife are caring for him at their home. From Mary Sarin, concern from Jennifer Buchwald. For my friend Bill Dussett, for the loss of his mom and son, both in the matter of a year. From the McDonald family, sorrow we had to put down our sweet dog, Precious. Joy, I'm starting, I think this is Josiah, starting PT for my ankle this week. Big joy to be part of this amazing community. And from Jane Pereira, a concern for my sister Rosie, who is battling an undiagnosed brain inflammation. I now light one final candle for all of the joys and all the sorrows that remain unspoken in our hearts. Let us join together in a space of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, Spirit of holy questioning, be with us now as we are with each other. Be with us as we hold all that's been shared today close to our hearts. Be with us in our grief, in our fear, in our fierce longing for things to be different. Spirit of love, be with us also in our joy, in our celebrations. Be with us in our welcoming of newly emerging spring and in our sacred attention to what matters the most. Be with us in our connection to one another, in the gentle holding of this community, and in our steady defense of all that we love and hold dear. Spirit of life and love, Spirit of holy questioning, we offer our gratitude for all that sustains us, all that nourishes us and opens us up to the sacred gift of this life. May it be so, and amen. Together we rest into several moments of shared silence, followed by our musical meditation.
Good morning. My name is Carol Thomas, and my pronouns are she, her. I have been asked to give the pledge testimonial this morning from the perspective of a longtime member. And in keeping with the question box theme for today, I will answer the question, why I pledge. I, I have been coming to Theater Parker since 1986, and I will let you do the math on that one. I was a few years out of college and had just moved to West Roxbury and was looking for a church in my community and saw the proverbial sign with the arrow on the VFW Parkway, Unitarian Church this way. I still remember my first service. I was a little surprised that there weren't very many people, but I stayed for a very engaging and educational service led by Minister Bob Haney. As I was getting ready to leave the service, then as now, our welcoming congregation was in action. A longtime member, Ruth Davis, literally took me by the arm and escorted me to coffee hour, where everyone was gathered around one small table and enjoyed some of the homemade brownies that she brought. One pan was enough for the whole congregation, if you can believe that. After a few more Sundays of Bob Haney's erudite sermons and connecting with people at coffee hour, there was no turning back. Despite the long odds based on the attendance back then, I actually met my husband, Doug Armstrong, here. Since then, the church has simply been an integral part of my life. We were married in this church. Both of our daughters were dedicated in this church and went through the religious education program, from the nursery to Sunday school to youth group, including the famous whitewater rafting trip in Maine and service to Rosie's Place. As a family, we participated in many holiday pageants and plays, and like any parent, at times, I wasn't sure how much was getting through. But throughout their childhood and young adult life, my daughters continue to make references that help me understand how much it really did shape them, their values, and understanding of the world. I was the age my daughters are now when I first came to this church. In more ways than I have the time to share now, this church community has supported me, my immediate family, and my extended family. The reason I pledge is to support this community where my whole family has learned and grown. I have seen this church develop into a vital resource and active voice for the local community and beyond. I know it has helped me get through the last difficult few months, and I want to support our UU voice and values, which I believe have never been more important. As John Lambert mentioned when he kicked off the pledge drive a few weeks ago and talked about our first pledge drive that was almost 40 years ago now, we realized early on that in addition to the Herculean effort, we would not survive without a solid financial plan. I was part of that team that planned the first canvas. And from my perspective, with the growth I've seen over the last 40 years, I can wholeheartedly recommend and ask that you pledge as a very good and essential investment with a guaranteed return. Thank you.
We now enter into a moment of thanksgiving and gratitude by considering our offering. Each week we take an offering to sustain the many ministries of this congregation. We give because we believe that we are part of something larger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space, and in transformation, and in hope, and in community, and in love. We give because we know that it takes all of us sharing our many gifts to make this space possible. With the faith that together we have more than enough. Links to donate will be in the chat and on the screen, and ushers will be coming around to collect something if you wish to give today. As Yukiko shares a selection by Eric Satie, an offering to sustain the congregation will be gratefully accepted.
Is the audio on?
Our reading this morning is a poem entitled A Gift by Denise Leverton. Just when you seem to yourself nothing but a flimsy web of questions, you are given the questions of others to hold in the emptiness of your hands. Songbird eggs that can still hatch if you keep them warm. Butterflies opening and closing themselves in your cupped hands, trusting you do not injure their scintillant fur, their dust. You are given the questions of others as if they were answers to all you ask. Yes, perhaps this is the gift, is your answer.
Seems like some folks online may need to mute themselves.
Yeah, if you're joining on Zoom, please confirm that you're muted at home, or if the host in the back, you can also manually mute people.
So it is now the time in our service where we are going to answer some of the questions that you all shared, and they are so great, and I'm so sad that we don't have 4 hours. But I think we might all be grateful for that. It's going to be lunchtime soon. We're going to answer a few of them, and thank you all so much for these questions. So Rose, I'm going to ask you the first question.
Great, I'm here for it.
Ready? Who was Theodore Parker, and why is our church named after him?
Such a good question. This might be familiar to some folks, but I think it's really worth talking through because it's a history that is all around us, but we maybe don't explain all the time. Theodore Parker was a Unitarian minister who served this congregation. I'm not going to be able to remember the specific dates, but someone in this room might know the dates. 1840-ish. Anyone know the specific dates? Amazing. Julie, who's a church historian, 1836 to 1840 something. 45. Amazing. And this was his first parish. He was ordained by this congregation. He came here straight from Harvard Divinity School. And really, it was his work here. This church had been around for a while before now. It was founded in 1712. But he started to become well known while he was a minister of this congregation, and then particularly after he left, he was sort of gaining in popularity and was asked to take up a pulpit in Boston. This was not yet part of the city of Boston. He was asked to take up a pulpit downtown, and really became a very famous figure in Unitarian history. He was known for his anti-slavery views, abolitionist views in particular, and his work against slavery, which was still legal in the United States at that time, and for his theology. He really had some notable theological work that is still reflected on in seminary today. And this congregation was named for him when, in the 1960s, there were 2 congregations that remerged and wanted to pick a new name, and he was still associated with this congregation, having served it all that time ago and having been famous. I think that about covers it. So he's someone who we remember as a figure in Unitarian history who we value, and we value our connection to him. There are 2 famous quotes. If you've heard the quote that was made more famous by Martin Luther King Jr. sharing it, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. That is a variation on a quote from Theodore Parker. And the other one I can think of is "BR is a religion." Is that what you're thinking of, or something else? The government of the people, I've been corrected, but government of the people, I mean, these are both Theodore Parker quotes, but government of the people, by the people, and for the people is apparently it was quoting him. Yes. I understand. Okay, so Theodore Parker said that first, and then Lincoln said that. This is not a fact that I know, so I'm just going to trust that you all are correct. Great, thank you.
Do you have a question for me?
I do have a question for you.
Online question?
I would love to hear your answer to this. I think that there are two questions here that go really well together. I'm going to ask them both, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Two questions. Is it really true that, quote, all are welcome here? And, in addition, how does the idea of inclusion and inherent worth and dignity manifest itself when thinking about Nazis and other intolerant groups? Really good questions. Getting right into it, I love it.
And somebody asked me online ahead of time that in our opening words we say, in the spirit of love, that we use every week, in the spirit of love, all are welcome here. And I will say, I have actually been wondering if I need to nuance that a little bit. And the week after the election or the inauguration, I did the welcome and I kind of rewrote it, and I found myself struggling over how to say what I wanted to say in that short way. I grew up in an era in Unitarian Universalism where we said, you can believe whatever you want. If you're a Unitarian Universalist, you can believe whatever you want. And as I have grown and as the world has changed, I have needed to nuance that and to sort of question that particular sentiment. And I think it says something really important, right? We are a faith tradition that asks questions and that has a diversity of beliefs about God, a diversity of beliefs about what happens after we die, and the value of the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And I think that there's a real distinction that we need to make now between the inherent worth of all people and the inherent worth of all ideas and all behaviors. That all behaviors are not inherently worthy and all ideas are not inherently worthy. Some ideas are incredibly dangerous. Wireless, is this not picking up? Okay. So, is this better? Great. Folks on Zoom, thank you. So, the idea that not all ideas are inherently worthy, that some ideas are really dangerous, right? And we're seeing that, I think, more and more now. It feels front and center right now. And how do we also recognize that if you are coming in the spirit of goodwill and coming in the spirit of love, we are striving to welcome you. Also knowing that we have internalized biases that we are working to uncover and sort of learn more about, and striving to widen the circle of welcome through doing our own work, and also recognizing that we are seeking to welcome people who are of like mind or like spirit. We need not think alike to love alike is another phrase that people often, I can't remember which Unitarian said that, but who was it? Baloo? So I think that's a phrase that we often hear in Unitarian Universalism. We need not think alike to love alike, but what does it mean to love alike, especially in this world where it feels like hate is so prominent? And I think I have been wondering how to make that more explicit, right? Do you have anything to add?
One thing I read a number of years ago I'd recommend about the paradox of intolerance, which I think many people speak about. I read it in a book called American Fascists that I also recommend, that there is that is a paradox to inclusion, to tolerance, that to have a truly inclusive and tolerant community, not all beliefs and behaviors can be welcome in that community. And I think it's something that we'll always be wrestling with, the sort of how to live that out and how to continue to affirm that all people are worthy, even if those same people's behaviors and beliefs are not welcome in our community. But it's a really good question to be grappling with, and we are always thinking about it and always wondering how that lives out in our lives and in this community.
Okay, I have another question. I think it's your turn to start. What do we say when someone asks if UU is a real religion?
I really love to this is a question I've been asked many times in my life as someone who grew up UU and grew up trying and often struggling to explain what this church was about, what religion is about. And I like to respond sort of from a place of curiosity. So asking someone, what they think makes up a religion, what's their sort of vision and idea of what a religion is, and seeing where Unitarian Universalism matches up with that. I think that, to me, we are a religion in that we have a structure that sustains our community, and we are centered on theological values, which means that, again, we may have a variety of beliefs about the nature of God or existence of God, but that's not all that theology is. Theology is about what is most important to us, what we believe to be true about the world, and we do have a shared theology here. Our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of each person is a theological notion, and among other parts of our theology, that is really something that binds us and that adds structure to our community. We have ritual is quite important to us, and the way that we are organized in, I think, an inherently religious way, and we are engaging religious questions together. So to me, all those things make us a religion, and I think that many people's preconceived notions of religion might not fit up with that, and that's also sort of okay. I'm not in the business of convincing everyone in the world that this is a religion or that this way of being together in religious community matters or is right for them, but definitely in my own view and in some of the ways I articulated, I do believe this is a religion, and those are some of the things I would say in response to that question.
That was a much more nuanced answer than I was prepared to give. I was just going to say yes.
So one of the questions that we got in Children's Chapel last week, and there's also some questions here that are connected to that, we were doing a lot of wondering about who started UU churches and why, when, and where did they start? So some of those questions. So Heather, do you want to take that first?
And somebody also said, please explain the word Unitarian, which will be part of my answer. So Unitarians and Universalists were two separate denominations until 1961, and they kind of evolved concurrently. The Unitarians in the early 1800s were splitting off from the Trinitarians. Unitarian means one, where Trinitarian means three. And the Unitarians believed in one unified God. And they basically said, upon close reading of the Bible, that God was not split into three parts, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but instead was one unified entity. And that Jesus was fully human. That was pretty radical. That was pretty heretical, right? That Jesus was fully human and was a child of God inasmuch as all of us are children of God. And that one of the things that they said was really radical about Jesus was that Jesus embodied the best that humans could offer, and that shone sort of a bright light for what humans could aspire to. So they took Jesus as a really important human figure and really inspiring human figure. So they were called Unitarians kind of as an epithet, which they then claimed for themselves. And that was in the early, I would say like 1805 to 1825 was sort of like when this, a lot of splitting off of churches. You'll see in the New England, at least, a lot of congregational churches have split off into Unitarian and congregational. So you'll see a lot of first churches in sort of on the town green in New England. That's often because of the history of splitting off from the Puritan churches, actually. So that's where the Unitarians came from. The Universalists, I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that, but sort of in brief, that's where the Unitarians came from. The Universalists kind of arose in the late 1700s. In 1795, a man named John Murray arrived in the U.S. In New Jersey from England. And he began to preach the doctrine of universalism. And universalism was a reference to the idea of universal salvation. So they were sort of in a very conservative theological time where Calvinism was the predominant theology of the day. Calvinism said that God was a very sort of hellfire and brimstone was the trademark of Calvinism, right? That God, there's an essay, I believe, by, I'm blanking on his name, Jonathan Edwards, who talked about sinners in the hands of an angry God, and that God would dangle, this is so gruesome, but dangle sinners like a spider over the fires of hell. And that was sort of the theology and that they were embroiled in. And they came along and said, no, wait, we think that God is actually deeply loving, and that a loving God would never condemn humans to hell, and that everybody eventually will go to heaven. And this is, so that's where universalism came from, the idea that everybody universally would be saved. So this is, I think, not theology that we hear a lot in Unitarian Universalist churches now, right? But I think that the threads of this really, we can see them traced throughout the last 200 years. And where I see this now is this belief that we have all come from the same place and we are all going to the same place. And we don't necessarily know what those places are, but nobody is more or less worthy of love and support and connection than anybody else, that we are all loved and inherently and beloved inherently, and that we see in the world, in this life, places where we're creating heaven and hell for each other, and that it is all of our jobs to create heaven where we can and to destroy the hells that we see around us and that are created in our world. And I think that's part of the reason that there's such a focus in Unitarian Universalism on justice and love and equity and sort of noticing the places where we have created those hells for each other in our world and in our life here and now. So that's a little bit about where it started, and I think I veered off into sort of where I see that thread now, but I think it's really important because you can sort of trace the lineage back.
I love that answer, and I just want to draw out one thing, because one of our questions from Children's Chapel was, why did UU churches start? And I think some of what Reverend Heather has shared is sort of important insight to that Unitarian Universalism, very much both of our branches that then merged in the 60s to form the tradition we have today and that has kept on evolving since then, are very much dissenting traditions. They're very much traditions that there was a worldview that was given to them in religious life, and they said, no, this is not how we think that the world works. We don't believe in an authoritarian, punishing God. We believe in a loving God. And we don't believe that that churches should exclude, or that only some people are saved and the rest of the world is damned. We believe that we're all in this together. So I think that's a really important sort of central piece of the legacy of where we started, why we started, and how we continue today.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Do you know the answer to this? I know the answer to this. It's very quick. How many people in the world are UU? I think it's about 100,000. It's very, very small, but a big impact. And I think there's about 1,000 church congregations in the United States, about 1,000 Unitarian Universalist congregations in the United States. Do you have one that you want to answer? Yeah, let's do that one. Okay. This is another question from Children's Chapel. What is God? Is God real? And is God alive? Keep in mind, we have to go to coffee hour soon.
I will try to keep it brief. And I just want to explain, because I think it's was really a beautiful moment of theological inquiry that we had in Children's Chapel last week, that someone brought up the reason why there's a question of is God alive is because someone in one of the children of our congregation who thinks a lot about dogs in her family who have died, who she feels very connected to, and how she is connected to those who have died. Her family talks about those dogs as being in heaven. And she's also heard that God is in heaven. So maybe God is also dead, which I think is a really smart way to think about it and is a really lovely way to describe the way that the type of spiritual connection that many of us feel with people or animals that we've loved and lost is there's a relationship between that spiritual connection and the spiritual connection that some and not all of us would name as God. I don't see it as my job or my position to tell you what God is, for the most part. I think that it is a deeply personal question that is really each of our responsibilities. I think this is an important part of this Unitarian Universalist approach. It's not only something that the members of our congregations have the ability to decide for themselves. I think it's also our responsibility to be in inquiry about spiritual questions and to find our own truth and our own path towards understanding, which may land you in a more atheistic worldview that is absolutely welcome and accepted here, and may land you somewhere on the spectrum of theism, some understanding of God of some name that may be very different. And I think the only thing I want to add here, because again, this is not my job to tell you the exact nature of God, but I think as we've already spoken to, I think there are some understandings of God and some understandings of atheism that are not compatible to our more core theological approach in Unitarian Universalism, which we've already named it a bit, but the way that our tradition evolved as a reaction and a dissent from a really authoritarian, judgmental God, that is still very central to us. So it would be incompatible in our religious tradition today to believe in a God that judges and punishes and is a sort of king and ruler. I think that is not compatible. And that the sort of core piece that connects both theism and atheism, I think, in our tradition, or theism and humanism is maybe a better word for it, is that belief in inherent worth and dignity. You know, a punishing authoritarian God is not one that trusts all people to make their own decisions and to have, doesn't trust that all people have inherent goodness, right? There's a kind of need to control if we don't see people as inherently worthy and full of dignity and have the right to self-determination. And a loving God does. A God of love, a God of community, a God of connection, or a not God of love, community, connection, belief in each other. That's the central piece, and I think what ties the many different views of this great mystery together in our congregations.
That's a good answer. And I'll just add one quick thing, which is that when I was growing up, I really longed for some answers about some of these things, and sometimes found we believe a wide variety of things. What do you think, 7-year-old Heather? To be somewhat of an unsatisfying answer from the grown-ups in my life. So in the spirit of that, saying that it is not my job to tell you what to believe, and also because I personally had an experience of longing for somebody else's framework, or to just know what the people in my life's framework, in my congregation's framework was, I will share my own answer to this, which is purely mine, which is that for me, God is a word that does really resonate, and it didn't always. It wasn't until I was probably in my 20s that it started to feel like it resonated more. And for me, it's a word that encapsulates ideas that are really hard to describe. It feels like in some ways a shorthand word to encapsulate really big ideas like loving presence that I can connect with anytime I need it, or community that feels like it's greater than the sum of its parts. When it feels like we've come together and done something that added up, the math doesn't add up. That it feels like a word for me that describes kind of a transcendent awe and wonder, a spirit of mutuality and interdependence that feels really sacred. A sense of, I remember watching Neil deGrasse Tyson's, what is it called? The Universe documentary, and just being completely in awe. And for me, it is a word that feels really, really useful, and it is not a personified, in my own experience, not a personified presence, but more of an idea. So I offer that to you. If you are like me in terms of longing to have those conversations and hear what other people think, that's sort of where I land personally. I think we are at our time to wrap up. Thank you all so much. This was a lovely experience for me, and I hope that you got something out of it. And I have so many questions now to mull over and think about, and I really appreciate your questions and your sharing with us.
And I know I just saw a hand in the audience. If you have more questions, we'll be at coffee hour, so you're welcome to talk to us.
So with that, I invite us to rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. We're going to be doing verses 1, 3, and 4. The words will be on the screen, and Brian will lead us. Thank you. Please be seated. Our benediction comes from Rainer Maria Rilke. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. Go in peace. May it be so, and amen. We have several announcements this morning. First of all, if you're joining us in person, we invite you to please join us next door for coffee hour in the parish hall right through these doors. And if you're joining us on Zoom, please stick around for some breakout rooms to connect with others online and say hello. Today at noon, Diana's List, which is our Middle East Solidarity group, will meet in the parlor. And then next Saturday, March 29th from 11 to 12 p.m., Diana's List will hold a standout for a just and lasting peace in Palestine here at the church. This Tuesday, we have our music listening circle for the whole congregation. And just a quick show of hands, who is planning to come to this? We didn't ask for RSVPs soon enough, but we just want to get a sense of about how many people are going to be there. Incredible. You are more than welcome to come, even if you don't RSVP. It's a dessert potluck. You're also welcome to come if you can't bring a dessert. But if you want to come and think about the future of our music program, please join us on Tuesday at 7. We'll start pretty promptly, so if you can be there right on time, that'd be great. And we also have our survey live through next Friday, the 28th, if you'd like to share your thoughts online. Rose is going to be running this spring a class based on Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, and it's going to have both some sort of reflections on the book, but also some spiritual reflections about how this moment is, how this moment is with your spirit. So if you would like to be in that space with other people thinking about these questions, please sign up with Rose. Next Sunday, the 30th, we are going to have a new member session for those newer to our congregation, self-defined. If you are curious about Unitarian Universalism, if you are curious about Theodore Parker Church, if you're curious about membership, or if you're just curious to meet other people who identify as newer to the congregation, please join us. We will have lunch, we will have childcare. Please RSVP to me so that I can make arrangements for dietary restrictions and have enough childcare staffing, but we will be very glad to have you. And finally, we have a stewardship update.
Rely on contributions and run their businesses to achieve their goals. So like those organizations, Theodore Parker Church relies on you, and you are the beneficiaries of what TPC offers. So in the past 3 years, I've been really impressed about how this small group can be so generous and committed year after year. So again, this year we're asking for everybody to give as much as they possibly can. And the next week is the final week of the March pledge drive, although if you can't make your pledge next week, you can do so after that, of course. And so the numbers, which we had a good pickup. Let's see, so you've seen this slide. 317,000 was our goal, 99 pledges. Of course, I can't do two things at once. All right, let's see. All right, so as of today, we have 237,570 pledged, 51 pledges, 75% of our dollar goal, 52% of our number goal, and we have 79,430 to go, as you can see. So we really appreciate people who have given, and we thank you, and thank you who are going to be giving next week and after that. And to pledge, which you probably already know this go on the webpage. And tpparker.org. Yep, next slide. tpparkerchurch.org, and on the bottom right of that page, you can make a pledge from that page. So again, thank you very much. We want to make sure this next week is a strong week for us. We have a good goal, but ambitious goal, but I know we can make it. Anyway, thank you.
And Yukiko will close us with a final piece from Eric Satie.